This is the North Carolina Rabbit Hole. I'm Jeremy Markovich. Quick question. What's better, dogs or cats? Now, you might think there is a lot of nuance or context or things to consider here, but there is only one correct answer. Dog. Now, I'm biased because I have a dog named Millie who honestly looks more like a Muppet. She follows me everywhere I go. Dogs are great. Cats, by the way, I always just think they're just thinking about murdering me. They would definitely dispose of my body in my sleep, and I just don't like any animal that is looking at me and thinking like, I wonder what that guy tastes like. So for me, dogs. For you, your answer may vary. But in the state of North Carolina, there is definitely a clear answer. There is one pet that is preferred over the other, and that pet is the dog. Now, let me explain. There is maybe an imperfect way to look at this in the fact that North Carolina has a state dog, the Plot Hound, but there is no state cat. There's a state marsupial. There's all kinds of state symbols. No state cat. A bunch of kids tried to make the bobcat into the state cat back in 2015, and it did not go anywhere. So that's one metric. Here is another. Did you know that in the state of North Carolina, if you steal a dog, any dog, it is a felony. If you steal a cat, not necessarily a felony. It is possible, not recommending you do this, but it is possible that if you steal a cat, it could be a misdemeanor. So you, like me, might have a lot of questions about this. By the way, I did not know about this at all until I saw a comment on a Reddit thread about this from a police officer who went through the police academy. And they taught him this. They also taught him that you cannot get a DWI on a horse. Stick a pin in that. That actually will be a plot point a little bit later. But for now, why is this the case? Why did this happen? Why is it so that the law says you can steal a dog and get charged with a felony, but not necessarily a cat? So I don't want to go too far back, but let's go back to the beginning of time. As long as humans have been hanging around animals, other humans have tried to steal those animals, either, to ride or to eat. And if you want to jump all the way forward to Old England, you might know a guy named King Charles II. This is the guy who signed the charter that created the colony, the province of Carolina. Also, that dude was a big dog fan. There is a thing called the King Charles Spaniel named for King Charles II. And when somebody stole one of those animals and he offered a reward, didn't get anything back, he actually put a newspaper ad in the paper in England. Now, again, this is the king of England in like the 1600s, asking for the dog back. He loved dogs so much. And in Victorian England, after that, stealing dogs, dog napping was actually a big crime. People would steal dogs and hold them for ransom because they knew their owners would pay. In the United States, there was also a problem with college students stealing the other college's dog mascots. Handsome Dan, which was the Yale's mascot, was stolen by the editors of the Harvard Lampoon back in the 1930s. In 1965, there was a Sports Illustrated article that detailed the theft and sale of a Dalmatian to researchers. That dog later died, and that incident actually led to the passage of a federal law that protects animals. But that doesn't explain what's happening here in North Carolina. And for that, you have to go back to the origins of a law that kind of laid out what would happen if you stole an animal. Now, animals generally considered to be property. But in the 1800s, horses were worth quite a bit. In fact, in 1867, the state legislature of North Carolina made it a death penalty offense to steal a horse. So you could be hung for stealing a horse. And there are a handful of cases in which that happened. Now, spoiler alert, that is no longer the case today. That went away after a couple of years. But what happened was horses and mules were then joined by livestock. So you're thinking cattle and pigs. Those also got harsher penalties for theft than other ones. And the reason being, if you're a farmer, those are kind of key to your livelihood, right? You can't plow a field or ride into town or take your goods to market if you don't have a horse, right? This is pre-car. Now, when pets started to become a thing, people were like, what's up with pets? Well, again, pets always considered to be property. And so stealing a pet to some degree legally was akin to stealing a lawnmower or a yard gnome. It could be like a misdemeanor. That was the case all the way up until 1989. And I want to introduce you now to a guy named Bob Swain, who, if we're talking about what he was like, he was probably what my late grandfather would have considered to be, quote, a character. He was a Democrat, but not the kind of Democrat you think of as a Democrat today. He was very conservative. He represented Asheville, and he became very powerful. He was a lawyer, and generally his MO was that a lot of times punishments are too bad for the actual crime committed, right? And this is a guy who represented, clients in court. Swain, by the way, I told you I would come back to this, was on the Judiciary Committee. Chair of that committee was the person who led the committee that declared that you cannot get yourself a DWI on a horse. That law is still on the books. So if you're really drunk, I guess you can ride a horse. Again, this is not legal advice. He was also a really talented orator, speaker. He single-handedly basically stopped an anti-cockfighting bill from passing. This is a bill that was going to pass almost unanimously. He got up there, started telling a story, and got it stopped. That is the kind of guy that Bob Swain was. But he was also very much a homer for a very specific type of dog, the Plott Hound. If you have not heard of the Plott Hound, basically it's a German dog that was brought over a long time ago by a family that settled in western North Carolina around Waynesville. They kept on breeding the dogs. They were working dogs. They hunted bear. They would track bear. They were a really specific type of purebred dog. And over the years, people were asking Bob Swain, can you maybe help us out, naming the Irish Setter or the Labrador Retriever as the state dog? And Swain's like, I don't actually like that idea because those are named for other places. But the Plott Hound, that sounds interesting to me because, again, that's local to him. It was the next county over from his district. So Swain, in 1989, introduces a bill naming the Plott Hound as the official state dog. And it passes pretty easily through the Senate, right? Not a whole lot of objection to that. At the same time, a brand new lawmaker named Julia Howard, a real estate agent from Mocksville, decides that she is going to introduce a bill of her own. Now, that bill would have changed the landscape for pet crimes. It would have made the theft of dogs and cats, any dogs and cats, to be a felony. Now, again, dogs and cats generally considered property. At the time, if a property was below $400, it could be a misdemeanor. If it was above that, a felony. Those numbers, it's around $1,000 today. So if you had a really low-priced cat or dog or a low-value cat or dog, and you stole it, that could be a misdemeanor, even though you're stealing somebody's pet. Howard didn't like this, but when I reached her on the phone, she told me it was for a different reason. It wasn't because she heard about the Plott Hound. It was because she heard of a different story. Now, this story I have tried to look up. I can't find it anywhere, but this is what she told me. Back in the day, a blind student had a seeing eye dog, and some other students at the university that the student was going to borrowed the dog, took it out for Halloween. They all got dressed up. They took the dog to a party. And then at some point, they let the dog go. And the dog got loose and ran into the street and was hit and killed by a car. And Howard thought that was a pretty awful thing. And so after hearing about that, once she got in the legislature, she decided to introduce a bill that would change the penalty, that would make it so all pet crimes, all thefts of cats and dogs would be felonies. And she introduces it, and it sails through the House. So you have two different bills that are going to be on a collision course. The Plott Hound bill from the Senate going into the House, and the pet felony bill going from the House to the Senate. Now, when this pet felony bill arrives in the Senate, it goes to the Judiciary Committee, which is chaired by Bob Swain. And this committee decides that it's not crazy about raising any theft of any pet to be the felony, right? They think it might be a little bit too harsh in all cases. So they basically kill the bill. And over in the House, Julia Howard is not very happy about this. And so she goes to some of her colleagues and they start talking about it. She's a Republican. She starts talking to Democrats and they figure out what they're going to do. And what they do is they go back to this Plott Hound bill that they now have and they add an amendment. And the amendment says that the theft of any dog, any pet dog, is a felony. And they stick that in, they pass it, and they send it back to the Senate. And Bob Swain is not happy. Publicly, he said, I think I'll pass this bill. We've got to work things out. I'm not crazy about this new part of it, but okay, that's fine. I'll do it. Privately, and this is a story that Howard told me, she saw him at a party, a gathering, whatever, in Raleigh. There were a bunch of constituents there. And she basically starts talking with him, and he says, and I'm going to make sure I read this here because this is what she told me. I'll tell you why I'm not going to let the bill go. You're a damn Republican, you're a damn woman, and you're a damn freshman. That private conversation did not stay private because it happened in front of a bunch of Swain's constituents. The quote ended up verbatim in the newspaper the next day. Again, that is what Howard told me. I can't find it, but there's a lot of stories alluding to this episode. And that kind of, threw some fuel in on the fire for Bob Swain. So eventually the Senate actually does pass this version of the bill, the plot hound dog felony bill, and it has to go back to work out the differences before it can become law, right? There are two different bills from two different houses, and so lawmakers from each house have to get together. This is a conference committee, kind of a regular thing, but just to stick it to Bob Swain one more time, the Democratic Speaker of the House appointed to the House committee 5 freshman Republicans, 4 of whom were women. Bob Swain not very happy to see all of them coming, very grumpy about this, but they do work it out. The bill passes. The women kind of, as a joke, get him flowers, and Swain says, and I'm going to read this out, quote, I want to express my appreciation to you for recognizing what a fine man I am, end quote. So that is how it became the case that it is a felony in North Carolina to steal a dog, but not a cat. And if you're wondering, by the way, Howard, very proud of what she did. Howard is now in her 19th term in the North Carolina House. She's 81 years old, still serving as a Republican. She says that she and Swain actually became friends after this until his death from cancer in 1991. And she learned a lot from that episode. And she does tell me, like, look, this is just, this is what happens, right? This is compromise. This is how you do things. And overall, she would have liked dogs and cats to be protected in the same way, but she will take what happened as a victory. Because after all, she says, I've never seen a seeing eye cat. So that is this week's episode of the North Carolina Rabbit Hole. If you like what you're hearing, you're seeing, you're learning about, check out ncrabbithole.com. All of this stuff tends to end up as newsletters there. I put out one a week. It is free if you want it to be, but if you've been reading or listening or watching for a while and you want to support this, one of the ways you can do it is become a paid subscriber. You can go to ncrabbithole.com/upgrade and learn more about how to keep all this stuff rolling forward. That would be great, and I would really appreciate your support. I'm Jeremy Markovich. This is the North Carolina Rabbit Hole, and I'll see you next time.